Yeah. Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session on open educational resources and the IDEA framework. Um, what we're going to do, because I think we have a kind of a full session and we have a lot of information to give you this afternoon. But we do have three of us here, is we are going to ask you to hold your questions for the end so you can jot them down, or alternatively, you can type them in the chat and we will do our best to answer as we go. So like when I'm talking, one of the Lindas can try to answer that. We'll do our best to keep up with that. And if we don't get to that, then we will wait to the end. We should have plenty of time at the end to answer questions. That's our plan anyway. Okay, so really quickly, I'm going to introduce myself and then I'm going to give my colleagues each a chance to introduce themselves. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sally Potter. I am the current department chair of the EMLS Linguistics Department. And I am the former, as in last year's OER faculty coordinator. I'm also the former ASCCC Open Educational Resources Initiative. So that's the OERI regional lead for Area A. And I was in that position for, I think, a year and a half. Prior to that, I was the OERI liaison for Fresno City College. And, you know, just in general, I have been a user, an advocate, and kind of a pusher of OER and ZTC for a number of years. ZTC, it stands for Zero Textbook Cost. And if you aren't exactly sure what the difference is between OER and ZTC, just hang on because I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. And so really quickly, I'm going to turn it over to Linda Vang and let her introduce herself, and then she'll pass it over to my other Linda, and then they'll pass it back to me and I'll talk about what we're going to be covering today and then go from there.
Well, thank you, Sally. I want to thank everyone for being here today. I'm Linda Vang, and I'm a full-time faculty in the Department of Sociology. I teach Intro to Sociology in a critical thinking class on social problems. And I'm relatively new to OER. I know I wanted to do it. Maybe some of you are at that level or you're further into it as well. And I like to dive in, but I dove in joining the OER work group so I can get acquainted with some of the information. And so I did the OER awards program at the just the lower level, where I would find a textbook that's already been available and incorporate it in my Intro to Sociology class. And I've done that last year. And so for both of my courses now that I teach in all the sections, I do use the OER. And I will say it's been a pleasure to work with Sally and Linda Kay in this endeavor, and other folks that are on the OER work group as well. And so it was just an exciting experience, and I'm really glad to be able to participate today. So thank you so much. Turn it over to Linda Kay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Kobashi-Gawa. I am a librarian here at Fresno City College. I'm also the co-chair of the library department. I am on 50% release time with the Title V grant, which is working on several things, but primarily our first year experience program, where we have been advocating for low cost, zero cost materials in that program, as well as campus wide. I've also am the current ASCCC OERI liaison for Fresno City College. So I took over Sally's role when she became our area lead, and I'll be serving in that capacity for this next year as well. Yeah, I've been a zero cost OER advocate for a little while. I've been using a lot of zero cost materials, so library materials in the library skills and LITEC courses that I teach. This year, I'm actually transitioning to full OER. So I'll be working on that over the next 9 weeks for my short-term class that begins in October. So I know the struggle. Yeah, so thanks everyone for being here, and we're looking forward to sharing all of this information with you.
So let's take a look at our agenda for what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to just talk to you about, OER, what exactly it is, what we mean by open, openly licensed, what the difference between open and free, where the overlaps are, why open is better, how it can be better than free. Um, and then, of course, we need to talk a little bit about why using OER is important, why and how it helps our students. And I know that I'm preaching to the choir here. I know that you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe it was important. So I promise to try my hardest not to pound this too hard, although it's, my favorite thing to talk about. So you just have to humor me here. I know for those of you who have come to my workshops in the past, this part is probably going to be review, and the slides are going to seem eerily familiar, but the thing that we have new today is this new aspect or this new lens from which we're going to be looking at OER today, and that is something called the IDEA framework. I'm really, really excited about that. In the summer, I'm going to actually grab the link for you right now, and just to give you a little a little preview of it. Well, maybe not yet. No, I think I'll save it. We'll wait just a second. But let me just introduce it real quick. In the summer of 2021, a group of California community, oh yeah, go ahead, Linda. Yeah, share the link. In the summer of 2021, a group of California community colleges from across, faculty from across the state came together, funded by the ASCCC Open Educational Resources Initiative, and they wrote what is called the ASCCC OERI, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism Framework. And it's a document. It really has two parts, okay? So the first part, it's a lot of background, explanation of idea, research, theory, etc. It's kind of like the preamble, gives you kind of the background and the rationale. The second part of the document is the framework itself, and it consists of 8 elements that users of OER can use to evaluate any OER or really any materials actually that you can get your hands on. But I'll get into why applying it to OER is relevant, easier, and appropriate. I am not an expert in this area by any means, and so that's why we called on Linda Vang to come in and help us out. This is kind of her bread and butter area, and I have to say that I am really, really excited this afternoon because I'm going to be learning. Then after we go over the IDEA audit framework, Linda Kobashigawa and I are going to show you some places where you can find OER for your classes, and we're going to be dropping a lot of these links in the chat to give you the chance to do some searching. And our hope today is that you'll be able to find at least a couple of materials or sources that you'll be able to use in your courses. And at this time in the semester, it's probably not going to be for, right now for, your classes to do a complete, textbook replacement. But, going forward, maybe in the future, or maybe even something right now that you can use as a supplement. So, something for a class that you're teaching right now. We are lucky that we have a double session today. So we we have this session until 2:45, and I believe that we're going to have enough time to give you a good chunk at the end to spend some quality time for your search, because in the past, our OER sessions, that's the thing that we never have enough time for. Unfortunately, not every discipline has a robust collection that's built up yet, but I believe that if it exists, we should be able to help you locate it today. Okay. OER, what are open educational resources? Those are sources that have what is called an open license on them. So anytime anyone writes or creates something, or any piece of music, any piece of art, anything, anytime someone creates something, it is automatically copyrighted. Now, if the author chooses, they may put a special license on it and make it openly licensed through a really simple process. And that is by placing what is called a Creative Commons license on it. The CC licenses are a little bit complicated, and that is because the author needs to communicate exactly what permissions they are granting others to have with their work. So what they're saying by putting these licenses on there is what you can do with this thing that they have created. Okay, so this is what the CC licenses look like. You may have seen these or something like this before. These are these little rectangular symbols with the little circles, the little CC, and then the little circles with the kind of icons on them. And the ones at the top are the most open, and then they go all the way down to being less open. The works that are in public domain are the most open, and you can basically do anything that you want with them. You can edit them, you can change them, you can give them to your students, you can even sell them if you want to. And then as they go down, they get less and less open. That means that they're more and more restrictive. It's important that as a user of OER, you understand what these licenses mean so that you know what you can and cannot do. So anytime you see the CC BY license, that means that you have to attribute the author or authors, and that's why it's got the little picture of the person that stands for the author. The CCSA stands for share alike. So that means that if you share it with your students, you just have to keep the same license on it. You can't change the license. This only becomes tricky if you're mixing it up with something that has a different license. So if you're doing something like that, you would just have to chunk it and make sure that you indicate the correct license in the correct pieces. So like at the bottom of the place where it ends. The CCNC stands for non-commercial. So that means that you can't charge for the material other than just basic, printing, shipping costs, that kind of thing. This gets a little dicey when we're dealing with a commercial bookstore, which of course you all know we have. And the practice of our bookstore is to mark up materials. There are different interpretations of this, but if you're delivering materials to your students digitally through Canvas, then that is not a concern that you need to have. Finally, there's the CCND, which stands for no derivatives. That one is a little bit rare. Authors who choose to license their work under a CC license usually do not use this one because the spirit of OER is all about collaboration with other discipline experts. You might see something like this on something like a poem or a work of fiction. That might have something like, or that might have a CCND license on it. There are a few other exceptions out there, but it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about ZTC or zero textbook costs materials. And this is certainly an option for those of us who teach in a discipline where not much OER exists. That includes linguistics, a discipline which I teach in. at least at the introductory level. And zero cost materials are going to be any materials that are free of cost for our students. And that can come from any number of sources. One of those sources is the World Wide Web. There are lots of great articles, videos, activities, etc., that we can find on the internet to supplement our courses. You can use those if they're appropriate for your courses. If they're on the internet, you can link to them, not a problem. You can even grab articles, grab text, attribute it, put it in your course. That's not a problem. Another source is our library databases, anything that our students can have access to through the library that is not openly licensed, but that the college has purchased a subscription to. We can pull the article, ebook chapter, and depending on the permissions, there are different ways to do that. Whether it's linked or a PDF version, or you're able to give it to every student in your class or one at a time. It all depends on the permission of the individual source and how you determine what the permissions are. Well, the way I determine that is I ask a librarian to figure that out for me. And so that's probably the best solution. And Linda Kay may have a better answer, but that's how I figure it out. And then really quickly, let me say a word about fair use here. Okay, so I know that a lot of you, because I've heard people talking about this, I've heard people throwing this out here, that you can use certain sources under fair use or a certain number of pages or a certain percentage of a source, and you can call it fair use and you're fine, you know, But really, if you're trying to be legal, this is something to keep in mind here. The idea of fair use is that it is not supposed to replace students purchasing the materials. So there is no magic number of pages or no magic percentage of the source that qualifies. And so that's why it's legal for us to copy the first chapter of our commercial textbook that hasn't come in yet, or before financial aid checks drop, to distribute to the students in the first couple weeks of class, because the expectation is that all of those students are eventually going to end up buying that book. So it's not replacing that purchase. So if you're trying to, you know, finagle your way through the fair use loophole and you're also trying to be legal, I would say you should just give up on that pipe dream. It's, you know, not going to happen. And then that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay. Here are some examples of ZTC. On websites, be very aware of accessibility issues, especially when you are linking out. Most websites, even if they claim it, they are not 508 compliant. There are lots of issues with that. I also have on here writing your own. And what I'm not suggesting is sitting down and writing a 500-page book necessarily for your course and delivering it for free for your students. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. But each and every one of us who are teaching classes are in fact writing materials. We're writing content. We are writing assignments, activities, prompts, discussion prompts, quiz questions all the time. And that is a source of content for our courses. So that can, of course, always be expanded. And that is just something to think about as you go forward. Okay, so Now we get to the why part. Why is using OER so important for students? Now, these are statistics from a national survey of college students, but we do have some local data that shows similar numbers. And anytime, any college does any study, whether it's large, small, looking at different populations, it shows similar numbers. More importantly to think about, I think, are that the students that are disproportionately affected by this are always going to be those marginalized groups of students. We just know by talking to our students, by common sense, and also by these studies that have been done, that the disproportionately impacted groups are always the ones that are more highly impacted by high textbook costs. They're the ones that always come up short every semester when they're trying to buy their books. They're also the ones that tend to have the fewest strategies to get around high textbook costs. They don't necessarily have that cash up front to be able to grab the few used copies that are sitting there on the shelf. They probably don't have connections on campus to be able to maybe share a book with classmates, or maybe do like a sophisticated internet search to find the correct book online for a low cost, where they're going to be able to get free shipping that's going to arrive in a timely manner. They might not be able to, use their savviness to be able to judge whether or not it's feasible in a particular course to go without a textbook. Because yes, that is very possible for some courses where they may be able to do without and maybe not get an A in that course, but get a grade that's good enough to pass for that particular course to meet their goal, whatever their goal is. Instead, what they may do is just drop the class altogether, or stay in the course and not drop and receive a failing grade. Or worst case scenario, just feel completely defeated and leave college altogether because it's just impossible to manage. So thinking about some of those things. Okay, so advantages for instructors. Let's talk about that a little bit. Now, yes, as we start to talk about this and think about this, and as you start to look for materials for your courses, you're going to realize that there is some work that is involved in using OER. For the most part, these materials may or may not, depending on your discipline, look exactly as shiny and new and, perfect as you're used to, with commercial text. Although more and more they are looking like commercial text. By their very nature, these materials are meant to be edited, and the authors put them out there when sometimes they are not quite perfectly polished, like we're used to seeing. But if you think about the restrictions that are put on you when you're using a commercial textbook, for just a minute. So when I was first teaching my very first classes, 20 plus years ago, and I just had no idea what I was doing and had honestly no business being in front of students. They just gave me a textbook that the previous instructor of record who dropped the class and bailed at the last minute that they put me in had selected. I was given this textbook. I just said, oh, okay, here's my textbook. I'm going to start with chapter 1, and then I taught chapter 1, and then when I was done with that, I taught chapter 2, and then I was done with that, I taught chapter 3, and then I gave a test, and then I proceeded through the book until basically I ran out of weeks in the semester. Boom, done. And that's how I ran my course. As I became a more experienced instructor, and as SLOs came into my life, and I learned about backwards course design. I started to supplement with more and more materials. I started to get more creative and listen to my students and make my course more relevant to them. And over time, I started using less and less of the commercial textbook and more of my own materials that I was finding. And then after some time, I realized that I was using more of my own stuff and less of the commercial textbook. And then I began to kind of feel guilty that I wasn't using it enough. So then I got to the point where I would sometimes assign readings and assignments from this commercial textbook that my students didn't really need, and make them do extra work. And then that also put extra work on me too, that I had to grade. And so lose for everyone. That's a terrible situation. So we want to avoid that, right? That's not what we want to avoid. So if you are starting not with this, commercial textbook that someone else has designed, but you are starting with what your students truly need, which comes from your course outline of record, your objectives and your SLOs, and then you are looking for the material that is going to cover that, using OER materials is a way to make your course perfect, tight, exactly what your students need, exactly what they want, and you can create really, really good assignments and activities and assessments. And yes, it does take some time. It's not going to happen in one semester or maybe even 2 or 3 semesters, but it is something that is always a work in progress. And it's a lot of fun. Okay. So how do you attribute sources? So just like we have to teach our students about using MLA or APA to attribute sources, this is how you attribute sources that are OER. You have to give the title, the author, the source, and the license, TASL. That's how you can remember that. Another easy way to do it is this Open Attribution Builder. And Linda, do you have the link for this, Linda K?
Yeah, I can drop it.
Okay, if you can drop that, yeah. Okay. So what this is if you're familiar with something like EasyBib or one of those websites, this is very similar to that. So if you are looking for something that's very polished and kind of, neat and clean, I made this attribution that you can see down here at the bottom through this website. Looks nice and neat. And you can use it to create the attribution for any source. It's just a kind of a tool that's easy to use. You don't necessarily usually need to use this though, because every OER source that you find is going to somewhere on it have the license printed on it. Usually it's at the very top or the very bottom. And if you can just, screen grab it or copy and paste it, and then you can just, use that if you are copying and pasting the information. Or if you link out to it, it's going to be there as well. So that's something that you don't necessarily need. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so let me just say a couple things before I turn it over to Linda Vang. you know, that's kind of the exciting part about using OER is that, you know, these sources, again, you know, while it may seem a little daunting at first, it is, you know, they're editable, you can use them. On one hand, you can just, you know, use them as is if you don't have the time or the energy or the wherewithal to do anything with them, especially at first. But maybe, you know, the second, third semester beyond, the possibilities are really endless with these sources. So as long as you kind of have an understanding of those CC licenses and what they mean and what you can do and not do with each one of them, you really can build a unique course that aligns with your SLOs and objectives and the way that you teach. So you don't have to follow your textbook like I did, just, you know, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and kind of be like, you know, like a little automaton for that. Your students will know that, they will appreciate that, they understand because they will get a sense of who you are and how you are connected to that material. I think I mentioned that in for introductory linguistics, there is no you know, off-the-shelf OER book that exists. Really briefly, I will tell you that here at Fresno City College, my college. Oh, I think I dropped off for a second. Okay, but I'm back. Okay. My colleague, Jean Carroll, and I, who has since retired, she and I worked together and we built our two courses, Linguistics 11 and Linguistics 10. And they are considered ZTC courses, not OER courses. So what we did was we went through and again, we, you know, we're using our commercial textbook, but we started with supplementing, and then we started grabbing all of these additional outside sources, building them up, using the commercial text less and less. And I think I did it first in a summer school class, a 6-week summer school class, where I just cut the cord, didn't use the commercial text, and just went for it. And it was a lot of work that summer to put all the modules together and build it up. But now we have these two great courses. I have a Canvas site and I share all the materials with all of the instructors who teach linguistics all throughout the district. Most of the instructors who teach linguistics in our district use them, and there are only a few who require commercial textbooks. So it's really exciting for our students all in our area. Let's see. And let's see. Okay. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Linda Vang now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, which I haven't been sharing my screen. Since I dropped off, I wasn't sharing my screen. So, okay, perfect. All right, Linda, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Sally. I'm going to go into sharing my part of the presentation. And thank you for that really helpful introduction. I know when I first started with OER, I needed to have to hear a lot of that information over and over again and review it on my own and so forth. And again, I'm relatively new to this. I'm coming in from the how do we apply some some of the auditing that's suggested by IDEA, which stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism content. In our OER, how do we find it? How do we audit it? How do we think in that manner? So the first part of this is to provide that theoretical background and the content analysis and the reason for, right, the State Center Community College Academic Senate to come up with this audit. Why do we need it in the first place? So we begin with Gay, 2018, who wrote Culturally Responsive Pedagogy. And when you get the link and you get a chance to look that up, pretty much I'm kind of summarizing this for you and just highlighting some important aspects to it. You can read more deeper, of course, on your own. When you look at culturally responsive pedagogy, it includes these factors here. And one thing that I really like about this is that this matches and connects with equity. And we're hearing about equity and that equity framework, right, throughout our colleges, throughout our district. If you just take, what does it mean to be culturally responsive? We start with this idea of social constructivism of knowledge. And that's something that we talk a lot about in sociology. So I just want to explain that, and perhaps most of you also maybe know that or have it in your discipline as well, is that knowledge is constructed from the world around us. So as instructors, right, we bring in our knowledge of the world around us. Of course, we talk about our content. We try to talk about that objectively, but we also have our framework, our reflections of how we were brought up, what education means to us. And the other piece to that is, right, our students come in, right, with their construction of knowledge in the world, their experiences, their values, their societies, their norms, how they were raised. And then we bring this into the classroom, and now we're teaching them a particular content. And so they may see that content perhaps through their experiences. And so I think the goal for us as instructors is, right, how do we bring their experiences, our ideas and our experiences into that content? And think about how rich that is. It's extremely rich, right? Whether you're teaching the sciences or whether you're teaching the social sciences or the humanities or the arts and so forth. So that's important as educators, that we think about culturally responsive pedagogy. And just taking out one piece to this, validating and affirming. That's what we've been, that's what we're encouraged to do as educators, to validate and affirm the students that are in the classroom. I'm gonna talk a little bit later about my own experience with this, but right, this aligns itself, validating and affirming with equity, right? The students feel that they belong there. We affirm that they belong there and that they are welcomed in the classroom and so forth, and the sharing of narratives and experiences when that becomes appropriate, right, is a part of that curriculum. Or if you just take inclusivity here, right, diversity means, right, the diverse representation is there. We know we have the diverse students in our classroom, no doubt about it, just by the essence of what community colleges stand for. Inclusive means, what do we do about that diversity? How do we incorporate it? And inclusiveness links to the ideas of equity. So this is an interesting framework to keep in mind as we move forward in this presentation. Is this it? The second part of the, let me just go back to this for a little bit. Diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? I read this somewhere and I thought it was helpful to me. Diversity means that you've been asked to the dance, right? So you're here at City College, you've been asked, you're there in the dance room. And inclusion means, right, has somebody, taken you from your seat and showed you how to dance and included you in that dance, right? And equity means that we make that dance accessible to everybody in terms of however they can dance. So it's kind of an interesting way to think about it. I included these two slides in here. If you go through the document, you'll see Theed. They did the content analysis in 2021 of comparing by gender and by race, the number of female authors that write commercial textbooks and OER, and then the next one's on race. So this was just, I put it in a pie graph because that's kind of how I think. And here you could see, right, we have about 1/3 of women writing commercial textbooks and about half writing OER textbooks, writing more OER, I should say, materials. So that representation is about half and half if we want to use that binary system of male, female for what it is. This next pie graph should not surprise us. Speaks to lack of diversity, right, and representation in terms of who are the OER authors by race. And this is what Thede found, you know, that the overwhelming majority of OER authors by race in her content analysis of OER materials were white, with less representation from Black, Asian, and Latino communities. It is what it is, right? And we want to increase that diversity representation with OER authors. So those were two background factors in why the State Academic Senate for the community colleges wanted to come up with an auditing process or way to determine OER materials if they reflect, right, diversity, inclusion, equity, and anti-racist content. The other work that guides this OER analysis is the social justice framework. And social justice is a link to equity as well, linked to our strategy and our mission as a community college, right? Distributive justice, right? The fairness of it. Number one, making OER available. And when we think about, you know, our community, and when we look around our community in Fresno and the surrounding communities, right, we have high concentration, of course, of poverty and lack of financial access. And so you are being just, making OER available as instructors. I mean, it makes so much sense. Not just in our community in the state of California, but all over our country, right, in the world. It just makes so much sense. Recognitive justice, right? Giving that regard and that valuing of diversity in the curriculum. We'll talk about images and case studies and so forth. And then finally, representational justice, right? Who represents the agenda, right? Is it our agenda? Based on my values and my background? Who speaks for those diverse students? So the social justice framework, right, runs throughout this notion of taking a look at our classes. I wanted to say, you know, I have such strong feelings about this, so I don't want to go off topic. But one way as an instructor that helped me see how can I make this connection with students was to reflect on my own self as an instructor and where I came from and what were my experiences in college. I was first generation college student. My students are surprised to hear that, by the way. But I was in grad, and I thought back on it, you know, since I got involved in teaching at community college, and I was at the University of Pittsburgh in the 1970s. You know, a time which ideally I thought, wow, women have every possibility for them. This 1970s, right? And you look back on that and say, oh no, right? We don't. But my professors, right, were white men, European, some of them that came into the college classroom with suits. You could see many of them smoking pipes still back in that day, even in the classroom. You know, they went to the faculty club for lunch. This was a world that was very, I didn't know what that disconnect was. I didn't have that consciousness that I have now. And so I think about that with our students. Right? And they don't know that background about me either. They don't know. They see what they see when I walk into the classroom. And so I remember that disconnect. And I thought to myself, what would it be like if they did IDEA back in the 1970s in my classroom? I really struggled. I ended up with the master's in sociology. I was in a PhD program, but I ended up with the master's, and then I went into social work. I felt such a disconnect. And I thought, what if they would have said to me, oh, Linda, tell us about where you grew up. What did your parents do? My father was a steel mill worker. Let's talk about how that can contribute to looking at, working class people or inequality in sociology. It never happened. And so I want to move forward with help making my students feel, right, they're a part of this experience and this knowledge. And we're building upon each other's knowledge. So I just wanted to share that with you as an aside. The other guiding principle for me is in social work, with regard to who represents the agenda. In some ways, it's the student. And what I mean by that is, of course, we represent the content. We've gone to school, we've studied this, and we share that with students. We teach that to students, right? We have the evolving expertise in our areas. In social work, we say, if you want to connect with somebody, go to where the student is, or go to where the client is. And so I do that in my class, like, where's the student coming from? And once you've made that connection, right, where are they coming from with this? Why is this class important to them? What do they need to know about critical thinking or sociology? How's it relevant for them? Once that relationship is established and they see that, diverse images and this welcomeness and this openness, learning takes place within that environment. Otherwise, the disconnect, as I experienced when I was in graduate school, the disconnect is there. And we're thinking about the disconnect versus the material in the classroom. So if that helps you, and many of you, I'm sure, are way more connected than perhaps I am based on your experiences and so forth. And that is truly, truly admirable. I've got to work on it. So that's the background for this. So let's get into a little bit of this, and gets to be really interesting. It really helps us to be creative and think outside of the box, right? So this is the State-Centered Community College OERI supported open educational resources. OER is the OER Open Educational Resource Initiative. It includes the idea of inclusive, diverse, equitable, and anti-racist. Okay, so again, diversity, the representation is there. What is it? And think broad with diversity, right? Many, many, many categories. In sociology, we call them social locations, not the local coffee shop, that location, right? But where you're socially situated, your intersectionalities. For me, I think a lot about age today as an intersection, like gender, right? Ethnic background, right? Abilities, people with abilities and so forth, and disabilities, and the LGBTQ spectrum, identity, race, ethnicity, where we grew up, all of these factors. Inclusive, do we bring them into the fold? How do we use those ideas that are there? Again, the richness is it's so rich, the content. Is it equitable, right? Is everybody getting a chance to learn the way they need to learn? And of course, anti-racist. Right? We should know what that is. We don't want to bring races and racist images and so forth, right, into the classroom, obviously. Totally inappropriate. So if you wonder about how you're going to start with this, I put start small, and I told Sally, I don't know if I wanted to say start small, but sometimes it could be overwhelming when you think about what OER am I adapting, let alone how do I check for diversity? So start small, right? Make some changes, make some adjustments. Use the OER resource idea framework that's in that document, and we'll talk a little bit about it. Think about your own discipline. Now, sociology is rich in examples. However, as I got into this, every discipline has rich examples, right? Some we may have to think about more than others. I was thinking about like math and math and so forth. And there was one suggestion with math to think about using like social justice data, like for analysis, right? Versus maybe, I don't know, some type of financial Excel file, right? Depends on what you're teaching, of course. And then I like that fourth one. I really, really do. OER should be, you know, let's work with groups. Let's work with, if people in our discipline, if they're interested, right? Try to get them on board. Also work across disciplines. That's actually where most of my help has come from the OER work group, right? Check with each other about examples. So I like that fourth one. I know sometimes we don't have enough time as faculty to get together informally or in work groups. Maybe sometimes our staff meetings can include, you know, 10, 15 minutes on sharing examples. We have to begin to think outside of the box in relationship to the goal here. And the goal is transformation. The goal's not, and that doesn't happen right away. The goal is not, let's just add a picture or two. We may start there, right? But the goal is transforming our curriculums to include, right, all people. That's who we're speaking to. So that's the background here. Let me see what's the next. Oh, okay. So we're going to jump into an example. This is from the framework. And I'll share some stuff here, but here's Melissa. There's a name. Okay, I was going to say, consider names as part of the audit. Consider names that we use. Maybe you've heard that before. Melissa. Okay, that's a name. It's a nice name, right? Or we're not judging that name, but it's Melissa. And she likes to wear high heels, right? When she goes out at night, these are stilettos. She knows they're not practical, but she likes how they look. She's been having pain in the balls of her feet lately, just the area just behind the toes. Even when she trades her heels for comfortable sneakers, it still hurts when she walks or stands. So I don't know if anybody would like to chime. Why don't y'all chime in on here and say, what about this picture? How would you provide some critique? I think this was used in a biology class, if I'm remembering correctly, but just the image itself, let alone the narrative, or the narrative and the image. What seeks out to you? Let's get some little bit of sharing here. Anybody? Even in the chat? What do you notice?
I can chime in, Linda.
Okay, who's that?
This is Denia.
Okay, thank you, Denia.
So, I mean, for starters, it's going over like gender and performing that gender. Melissa, we're identifying as a female here, and we're already assuming that, you know, that is her gender based on shoes, which could be completely different. We are also using Melissa, which is a very, you know, white name, and that is not representative of a lot of our students. And then the performance that, you know, somehow all females have like wearing these heels, and it's very performative gender stereotypes that it's obviously not true and not the reality of a lot of our students.
Says, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you mentioned stereotypes, right? We want to be careful. Stereotype means, right, that we apply one idea to a large group of people based on a single characteristic. Females like to wear these kinds of shoes. Yeah, that's a very good analysis. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And, you know, I want to say, when I have to think about my own biases too. When I look at this, I go, oh my God, seriously, I'm going to say this to all of you. How can women wear those shoes, right? Right away, I've got this bias. It's okay to wear those shoes. So what are we talking about here? How do we change the writing? How do we change the image? And that's the next highlighting feature here is, look at this. Think about how you feel, right? How students may feel when they see this versus the other image. Let's take a look. We're very used to seeing this. We're very used to seeing this on advertising and television, right? In the written ads. Look at this. I almost feel like I take a deep breath. I feel a sense of liberation. This is Amari now. Amari loves, and Amari could be gender neutral. It could be gender neutral, non-binary. This is from an OER textbook, I believe. Loves wearing high heels when they go out at night, like the stiletto heels are shown. Amari uses gender neutral pronouns, they, them, and their. They know high heels are not the most practical, right? But they like how they look. So my judgment about how can women use those, right, goes out the window, right? People like to wear these. They're stylish, they're fashionable, right? There's no judgment on that. But lately, Amari's been having some pain in the balls of their feet, in the area just behind the toes, right? Even when they trade heels for comfortable shoes, it still hurts when they stand or walk. So, perhaps the biology instructor now is going to talk about how you can help yourself with that pain, even though you like to wear these heels. I know the OER book said we want to get to the point where we don't have to put Amari uses gender neutral pronouns, right? Maybe be able to take that out at some point, but that's a form of education as well, that we begin to think in terms of using those types of pronouns as to help people identify and to incorporate those. So how do you feel when you see this? How do you think our students might feel? Would they feel more included? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think they would.
I think they would too. So this is just one example, students, and think about this being in biology, right? This was an image. I do believe they talk about where these images are. It is in the link. Let me just show you a couple other ideas that have been talked about actually in the literature. And this one kind of hit home to me too, because I teach an interpersonal skills class at Fresno State. And I had just talked about Maslow. I'm not, again, an expert on Maslow and how he talks about,
Linda,
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna jump in here because I think like I took up a lot of time in the beginning, and so I want to make sure that we have enough time for searching.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm gonna just fast forward to
okay.
Linda K. Are you ready?
I wasn't following the time frame. So
No. My fault. It's my fault. It's my fault.
I was really enjoying it, so
I know.
Can I say one thing here?
Yes.
1 minute. Okay.
Yes.
Just a Western perspective, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The First Nation perspective is, right, we come into the world self-actualized. So another way to think about resources is, well, I got a Western perspective. Is there an Indigenous perspective? Is there a non-Western perspective? And that was my last visual too, that we can look at the map of the world differently as well. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. That was so awesome.
Oh, oops.
Yes.
Linda, if you wouldn't mind stop sharing, because I think I'm gonna share the PowerPoint. Okay, can everyone see my screen? Okay, I think so. I think everyone can see the slide, right? Okay, perfect. So at this point, I'm going to go into showing a few different collections and resources that might help you get started. start small, as Linda mentioned, with the framework and incorporating a lot of these changes into some of the OER that you might find and maybe are using currently. I just saw, I think, Juanita's comment about even unsplash images and need to be a little more representative, which is, I was like, oh, I'm gonna talk about some images that might have more representation behind them, some of these diverse and inclusive collections. So there are a few that are out there. Some of you may already be using some of these, familiar with some of these, or the IDEA framework is also a little new to me. So if you are using resources, I would love for you to share them just so that we're aware. And if faculty, do come to us and ask us questions about using the IDEA framework, that we can have some of these resources to share with them as well. So a few of them are Diverse Tech Geek is a well-known blog, and they have a blog post for sources for LGBTQ stock photos. Women of Color in Tech, it's a Flickr collection that is available under a CC attribution license. Disabled in Here collection, these are also stock images and photos available free under a CC attribution license. And then there's the Gender Spectrum collection, which are also stock photo images of trans and non-binary models. One thing I do want to say about these collections is when using them, at the very least, use the use guidelines. So Sally went over sort of the attribution of how to attribute via the open license, so that tassel model. But the use of guidelines for each of these, they not only explain the license and how these collections should be attributed by ownership, but they also explain best practices for things like captioning, for describing the people who are in the images, and also suggestions for the context that the images can and should be used in. So if we go back to the elements for consideration in the IDEA framework, you want to think about whether the use of the image, from one of these collections in a certain section of the resource may reinforce certain stereotypes, as Linda was mentioning, or a negative image of the communities that are represented in them. So you can also, I think one of the examples in the framework is, showing an image of a person in a wheelchair eating candy in a chapter about carbohydrates in a biology text. And I think biology is used often in these examples because one of the lead faculty who works on it is a biology instructor. So I think they pull a lot of their examples in there. But you can include these images of people doing various things that don't necessarily relate to their identity, but just show and give examples of the lesson and the content that you're writing about. So these are some DEI resource lists. So one disclaimer about the materials that are in this list is they may not all be openly licensed, but I think they're helpful with ideas for getting started on different parts of the IDEA framework, like uplifting diverse perspectives, crediting diverse researchers and authors, and also representation in the voices that are in the OER. So there's some of these, again, I didn't actually go out looking for STEM resources specifically, but I found quite a few of them in just the short amount of time that I was looking for some of these collection and resource lists, just because I think there's been a huge push in STEM to bring out voices from minoritized researchers and authors, and I think that's really awesome. And so a lot of these do represent the STEM fields, but I wasn't necessarily going out looking specifically for those. But again, if you have suggestions, if you're creating OER, if you're using OER and you're incorporating a lot of the framework or things in the framework into your OER, and you're using specific researchers, you're citing specific researchers, I'd love to know about them so so that I can put them in these lists that we're collecting and making available to faculty. So Some of these, okay, so scientist spotlights. This is biographies and research of a diverse range of scientists to teach different scientific concepts. So many of the spotlight bios, there's quite a few of them. A lot of them are written by college students from minoritized backgrounds. So it's sort of college students speaking to other college students. And I believe all of these materials and scientist spotlights are freely available for anyone to use and incorporate into their courses. People of color in tech, these are interviews, articles, business news across the industry in different countries. Cite Black Women is a movement that seeks to motivate those in academia to pursue, to read and to center, and of course cite the work of Black women, and it has a lot of authors on there and really cool podcast episodes and things that are highlighting Black women scholars in various fields. Astronomy of Many Cultures is a very specific one, but it's a really exhaustive list. I think the person who put it together is also the author of the Astronomy OpenStax book, and it's a exhaustive list of resources on astronomy outside of Europe and the US mainstream. And then there's also the American Institute of Physics that has some teaching guides about the contributions to STEM by people of color, by women, by people in the LGBTQ+ community. This one, the lesson plans and discussion questions are free to use. There is some supplemental content like articles and things that may be copyrighted. So look out for those, but the lesson plans and discussions are free. And then APA has a featured psychologists section in their ethnicity, race, and cultural affairs portfolio that features notable ethnic minority psychologists. And there are other good resources from ERCA as well. Okay, I see lots of things in the chat, but I'm just going to keep going unless there's a question.
That's me dropping links.
Oh,
mostly.
perfect. Okay. And then I'm gonna broaden it out and just talk about finding OER and different resources in general. So Sally, again, is going to continue dropping those links and probably chime in to talk about some of these resources. So these are open media collections. And so now all of the resources that I'm talking about at this point, you will find OER. There's Creative Commons licenses attached to all of them. So there's the Getty Institute of Open Images. Library of Congress has a ton of images that you can use from its archives as well. And also Creative Commons has its own image search engine that finds digs across a lot of different repositories. Oh, and Unsplash as well. Okay, so finding OER in different areas, there are I think we're going to highlight about 10 different places that you can find OER. The primary one that we like to start with is the ASCCC OER initiative. And this was created, of course, by community college faculty here in California. And it's, Sally, do you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, so sorry, I was copy pasting for the chat. Yeah, so the resources that you will find on the ASCCC OERI initiative website, these are going to be the most probably polished, vetted, cleanest, best, most like commercial textbooks that you'll see. They are grant funded. They are, highly edited, written by California Community College instructors. They often I want to say exclusively have a CID number attached to them, but they're limited. So that's kind of the problem. So if you're lucky enough to have one of the, find something here, then you're pretty much guaranteed that it's going to be something of quality and something that is, that's really good in quality. But we like to start with this because if you find something here, then it's good, go for it, and you're you know, your search may be over at that point.
Cool, thank you. And this is the website, and it has other resources on there as well. So not just the OER, but they do webinars, I think nearly weekly during the semester. And I do send out an email with a list of those webinars at the beginning of every month. They send us a list, and those are hosted by different OER leads, liaisons, and other faculty from across the California Community College system. So if you're interested in seeing those or getting those newsletters, let me know and I'll put you on my list to forward those out to you if you're interested. And I think Sally dropped the link to that chat in there. And this is just a layout of what the OERI website looks like. So you can search by your subject area as well as course ID. The OERI also has a Canvas site. So you can search by collection by discipline, by CSU General Ed. You can, I think the easiest way that I found it in Canvas Commons is just searching ASCCC. And then you can look at all of the OER that's available in Canvas Commons published through the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. Sally, do you have anything to add for the Canvas site?
The only thing is most of the resources that you're going to see on the Canvas site are the same ones that you'll see on the OERI website, because those are, you know, controlled by the or monitored by the same group. They are working to migrate the resources over. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, however you like to search. If you like to search the website or the Canvas site, there's probably more on the website though. So just kind of keep that in mind.
Okay, so we're going to go into complete textbook repositories. So these areas have, or these places have full textbooks on nearly any subject. Some are a little more narrow and limited in the scope of the subjects that they cover, like OpenStax, but quite a few of them you can search hundreds to sometimes thousands of full textbooks that are OER. So Open Textbook Library is what I call a referatory, but it doesn't really matter. But what it does is it just links to materials from different authors and publishers instead of housing those materials directly in the platform. So it just pulls from a lot of different textbook repositories or open textbook repositories, and then just links out to all of them. So it's got, the last time I checked, over 900 textbooks. A little more than half of them have been reviewed, so they can be peer reviewed by other faculty in the discipline from different organizations. So if you look at those reviews, they look at the standard things like accuracy, comprehensiveness, the organization or the flow of the work, its readability, and also cultural relevance and sensitivity. So you can look at the different scores for that and the justification behind those scores. And then the book's given an overall rating as well. So again, lots of different subjects covered in this one, business to engineering, biology, math, law, and the natural sciences. Let me see if there's a different page. Oh, okay. Oh, this is a little older screenshot, but I know there's more than 900 titles available in Open Textbook Library. Sally, do you have anything?
No, just the suggestion there is just use the browse by subjects. That's the better way to search.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Okay, OpenStax. OpenStax, you've probably heard of it because OpenStax is pretty popular, and I think it's used by quite a few faculty on our campus. So it's a project of Rice University. The titles are all peer-reviewed by educators, and they look for pretty much the same things that I mentioned in the Open Textbook Library where the reviews are. But this is a formal peer-reviewed process that OpenStax Books goes into. It is a smaller collection, about 40 titles, but they do range from astronomy, econ, psychology, sociology, and college readiness. There are a few of those. And again, anyone can adopt titles from OpenStax. You can just link to the page if you want to, and it's really nicely organized and readability is really great. OpenStax partners too with OER Commons and some other organizations and companies, so you can find ancillaries that are in like Nearpod, I think, and Canvas Commons. There's ancillaries available as well. And most of the titles do come with instructor and student resources. You could just go into, there's different tabs in OpenStax where you can look at instructor resources and student resources. And something that I like about OpenStax that I haven't actually seen, and Sally, you might know more about this, is it has a really transparent revision and errata updates. So you can go in and you can actually see where faculty have requested that a change be made or found an error or something like that, and look at how that's being edited or the timeline for the change and what's being changed. So I think that's really important and helpful too for adopting OER.
The only thing I'll add to this is that these books are awesome. They have a lot of ancillaries that you can use, the test banks, the PowerPoints, all kinds of fun things, but they're kind of limited. So social science, the regular science, but you know, math, but that's it really. Yeah, so if you're lucky enough to be in one of those disciplines, you probably find a book, but other than that, all the rest of us are not so lucky.
Yeah. Okay. So now my clicker's not working. Okay. SUNY, Open SUNY textbooks. This one's a smaller repository too, but that's because all of the textbooks are authored and peer reviewed by SUNY faculty and staff. So it's a really easy browsable collection. You can browse by author, subject, by SUNY affiliation, and then if you want to adopt a textbook from SUNY, they would like to know. So it does cover oh, I'm sorry, I'm mistaken. So it does cover a large range of subjects, but there's about 1 to 4 titles for each subject. So it does have a larger scope, just fewer titles in there. And so, yeah, again, what I like about SUNY textbooks is that the titles are either original work or a significant adaptation of another open work. So it is somewhat exclusive content, though. Some of those larger like repositories will pull in SUNY material, so you might find them in some different areas, but it's pretty exclusive to this particular site. I'm sorry, I keep advancing too quickly. Anything for SUNY, Sally?
No, I think that
Okay.
covered.
Thank you. Okay, so BC Campus. Oh, I think this is yours.
Yeah, so BC Campus is the cool thing about BC Campus that makes it a little bit different is that they have a higher accessibility requirements that go kind of above and beyond, what we have for 508 compliance. And they also have this kind of cool feature when you get into it that where you can filter and for accessibility, and then see which of the sources have ancillaries. So it's kind of has like a cool feature when you're searching. And it's got, faculty review. And so that's kind of that's kind of the special thing about BC Campus.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about aggregated repositories, and I'm going to try and move a little faster. Maybe I won't say very much about each of these other ones because I know I'm running short on time. So Skills Commons is the other one. This has more workforce training materials, and you can browse by industry or just do a search by topic. Sally, do you have anything
No, just the fact that this is the one that is going to have your, where our CTE people are going to be likely to find their materials here. This is the place for you.
Yeah, and different types of materials, not just textbooks, but manuals and activities and assignments. I think there might be test banks in here too, so different things like that. Okay, Cool for Ed is a larger repository. It's got a lot of different types of materials. It is a collection that is hosted by the CSU system. So you can search by discipline. There's a material showcase where you can look at or read about how faculty created their materials, challenges in the development, student feedback, the course that it's used in. So there's a lot of extra really cool information in Cool for Ed. And I think it's all housed by Merlot, which is also a really huge repository for OER materials. Okay, so that's a look at OER for Cool for Ed. Open Oregon is an aggregate database of both openly licensed and library materials. So it is a little bit smaller, but you can search really easily by subject. There's not too many subjects included in Open Oregon. Again, it is a mix of OER and library materials. So if you find a library resource in this Open Oregon database that you would like to use, just let me know, contact the library. We may have it available in one of our databases as a ZTC material.
The only thing to say about this one is, yeah, you can filter your search by community college or university level. And then keep in mind that this is Oregon's repository, not California's. So the courses are a little different, the numbering system and all that. So there's a little translation there.
Thank you, Sally. And OER Commons. So OER Commons is a huge database full of all kinds of resources. You can look for entire courses, you can look for textbooks, assignments, presentations, all kinds of OER resources. You can usually just filter by subject and education level, but there's quite a few different limiters and filters once you begin your search that you can use while you're in here, just to, if you're just looking for something for a particular lesson or section, this is a good place to look to drill down for those specific materials. Okay, LibreText. Sally, do you want to talk about LibreText?
Sure. Okay, LibreText, not for the faint of heart. Yeah, so you'll see a lot of the same resources that we talked about in the other repositories also on LibreText. LibreText is a platform. It actually has also a course management system built into it. So some colleges actually use it in place of Canvas. I believe maybe some of the K-12s use it, or that's the intention of it. But it is requires training to use it and all the bells and whistles in it. So just keep that in mind. You can see a lot of LibreText materials when you're searching on Canvas Commons, and so if to use and to share materials on LibreText is not that difficult, but if you want to build, edit, remix, I would highly suggest an investment of time in how to just know that you're going to have to get into it, and you're going to have to make a time commitment.
Thank you. And I will say, even though there is a learning curve with LibreText, they do offer a good amount of support. The creator of it, Del Mar, has come out to Fresno City and done a workshop for us. And we've also had like a LibreFest, I think, where we had a group of faculty sit down and taught how to use it over a day or two. So they do have a good support for learning how to use it. And then the last one I think that I have is OASIS. So this it's aimed to make discovery of open content easier, but I think it works just as well as the other ones. So it pulls from a lot of different sources, lots of different types of resources, so including textbooks, but modules that you can upload into Canvas, podcasts, video, so different types of media, and other types of resources. And let me see if I have how to search for it. So it's a really simple search area or search tool that you can use. If you use the advanced search tool, you can actually just select from a drop down of subjects, and then it'll list out the different courses that you can find OER to or for. Okay, anything about OASIS, Sally?
No, I
Okay.
think that's good. Yeah.
Okay. And of course, if you have questions about any of these, you can feel free to reach out to us. I think we also have a list with all the links, so you don't have to try going through the chat, copying all of them. We can send you the list after today. Okay, and then Google Advanced Search is, it might be your go-to already sometimes with OER, and when I'm really not familiar with the subject at all, I will go to Google Advanced Search and use its what is that called? I can't see it anymore. The usage rights option in the advanced search screen. I know it's really small, but you can look at resources that you are free to use and share, that you can modify, that you can even use commercially, and just limit to those that actually have the usage rights and enabled so that Google actually sees it. So that's actually one of the best places that I actually think. I know it's kind of weird having a librarian suggest Google, but for OER, it's really helpful. And you can find tons of LibGuides related to OER too, that also compile a lot of these resources by subject to when you're looking online. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to highlight is Faculty Select. So this is available through the Fresno City College Library. So it's a collection of both OER and also DRM free titles. And DRM free just means the material is not openly licensed. We have to purchase it, but we purchase a perpetual license, and that license does not have any limitations on downloading, printing, and copying and pasting. So you can take that book and make as many copies for your students as you need to. You can't make any edits to it, but you can pull out chapters or different sections and just use those in your courses. And again, there's no limits to printing or copying and doing any of those things. But one of the cooler things about Faculty Select is that it does pull from a lot of these repositories that we had just gone over. So BC Campus, SUNY, Open Textbook Network. And if you're familiar with EBSCOhost, that is the host server that it's in. So you just go to our databases list, select Faculty Select, and then do your search for whatever materials you're looking for. You can limit in there to OER only, or you can just search for those DRM free materials and submit a request for us to purchase, and then we can purchase a license to that material and you are free to use it. If it's an OER book that's in Faculty Select, you can begin using it as soon as you find it. It's just another place for you to find materials that you can use and share with students. Okay.
I think this will work. So we have the PowerPoint on Google Slides, and I'm gonna drop the copy link in the chat. I think this will work. And if I do give you all ability to edit, please don't edit, okay? Okay, I'm gonna just try it. It's in my Google account, and also don't request access to edit because I don't want to get a million emails either. Okay. Yeah. And if you would rather have it emailed to you, here's my email address, and I can again share the link that I think will work. Or better yet, what I'm more comfortable with is downloading it to a like PowerPoint document and then sending it to you that way, whatever you prefer.
I wanted to chime in if anybody wants to. I'll put my email in the chat to like review a diverse image or names or suggestions, or, wants to converse about that, to feel free to contact me. So I'll put my email in the chat. Thank you.
And I want to use this actually because Linda Vang mentioned this earlier and I forgot it in my introduction, is that the campus has an OER work group that myself, Sally, and Linda and Denia, and I don't know who else is here, but are part of, and I'm the chair of it. So if you're interested in, we talk about different things, different issues going on. We talk about how to manage your ZTC course if you want to learn how to do that, and other things. We had a low cost resolution that was just passed in Academic Senate last semester. So there's different things going on. And if you're interested in joining, please let me know or Sally know.
Yeah, and my suggestion also is when you are in your department meetings, when you run into your colleagues in the hall, just, slip it in how wonderful it is that you don't have to, bug your students about buying their textbooks. You don't have to worry about, hassle your students. You don't have to worry about those students who haven't bought their textbooks, students who show up with the wrong edition, students who, their access code expired, all of those problems.
Okay, so I have 2:46.
Okay,
Should we
yeah, are we safe to turn the recording off now? Okay, I'm going to do it.